Session title is on the board. If you are in the wrong room and you're sitting there awkwardly wishing you'd moved before now, I won't be offended if you leave. Good. That's promising. So before we start, a little bit about me. My name's Joe Billingham. I work as multiple different things, but primarily a senior BI developer for Power BI Sentinel. If you want to connect with me, please do so through LinkedIn. I've worked with SQL Server and data in some form for the last decade at least. Other than my work, I work for the data community, so I host a monthly Birmingham user meetup. That's everything from an hour lunchtime session on a Thursday afternoon up until a full day event we've got running in October with 7 different speakers and everything in between. And aside from data, my interests outside of work are guitars. I can play the guitar, I fix guitars, I even build guitars. Hence the tag for my blog, dataluthier.com. Please pay it a visit. I talk about data community, I talk about tech things, follow it, there will be more content coming up. I need to do a little bit of admin before we get into it. So I need to let you know that this is a sponsored session. I'm here with Power BI Sentinel. The primary purpose of us being here is to sell the product. What I want to iterate before we start is that this is not a 30-minute session of me selling Power BI Sentinel to all of you. I'm here to talk you through the importance of data governance, how to make a plan, how to run your data environment, specifically focusing on Power BI and Fabric. There is a third-party tool that's very useful. No prizes for guessing what it is, and we will come on to that, but that is not the purpose of the talk. So the first question is, why Power BI, why Fabric? What you can see on the board here is the Gartner Magic Quadrant that shows you up-and-coming BI and analysis tech all the way through to market leaders, and you'll notice over on the right-hand side and up the top, Microsoft are far and beyond the competitors. I believe it is the future for BI and analytics, so that is what we are going to focus on today. This slide asks some important questions on what you need to do either before you start your data journey or what you do to fix the little bit of a mess you've got in with your data journey. It also doubles up as an agenda for the session. As you can see, there's quite a lot to get through and not a lot of time, so I will ask, and the headphones, I suppose, do help, that you save all your questions till afterwards if we've got time. Chances are we won't, but the good news is I'll be over on the Power BI Sentinel booth. Come and see me. Come and ask me questions about the session, ask me questions about data, ask me to show you pictures of my dog. Just come and talk to me. So what we're going to go through is how to build confidence in a data environment. Now, this is more of a generic concept. This isn't necessarily Power BI and Fabric. Then we talk about what a data estate is. It seems like quite an obvious thing. Everybody knows what a data estate is, or at least they think they do until we raise some questions. How do I impose security? This is where we start talking more about the Microsoft technology. We do that through various methods, and then we'll move on to how to monitor what's going on in your environment. So, how do I build confidence in the data? The first 4 points that are on the board, you can almost throw a bubble around because they all factor into the same thing. This is how you build confidence. As people who are supplying a data environment to your customers, and by customers, I mean customers, but I also mean your end users who are effectively your customers in the business, you need to make sure that they are willing to adopt a new data strategy. How many of you, by show of hands, are living in Excel hell? Yeah, about the right amount. Now, it's difficult to get that mentality out of your staff. The way you do that is when you do provide a new data environment, you make sure it's right first time. And you do that by making sure that the data is trustable. What do I mean by trustable? Well, is it accurate? Business decisions, financial decisions are being made on this data on a daily basis. You need to make sure that what is written in one report and what is written in another report match. That's where we move into consistency. So we'll move into Power BI for an example. You've got a workspace. Workspace has got a semantic model in it. I'm going to keep calling them data sets. I'm stuck. I'm sorry. I'll try and call them semantic models. You've got a semantic model with a measure. The measure is called total sales. Total sales is driven by a business logic. That business logic is, I don't know, sales value plus tax. That gives you your total sales. Somebody else has a data set in a different workspace that has a measure called total sales. Exactly the same business logic, except they're including shipping in their calculation. Now you've got two people looking at slightly different reports that have got the same column in them that are showing different values. What they're then going to go and do is open Excel, compare the value to Excel, realize that Excel's right, and stop using Power BI. So you need to get it right first time. Availability of data. If you've got somebody who's pulling reports out at 7 o'clock in the morning, your data has to be ready at 6:55. It has to be refreshed. It has to be up to date. It has to be correct. If the data's not refreshed and it's not correct, and the user doesn't know, they could be using week-old data that hasn't refreshed, making decisions on that. That is such a risk to business. It is ridiculous. You need to be able to monitor that availability to make sure what they're getting is the truth. Data transparency, that relates to giving the right people access to the data. Have the people who need the permissions that they need got them and no more? It's easy to just throw admin at everybody because then, hey, they can do what they want. But then how do you control that if everyone's just doing what they want and there's no one really keeping them in check? So that transparency is important. The fifth point is a little bit out of this confidence circle, but it's still an important one to raise. For anyone who's ever been through an ISO 27001 audit, trust me, it's a headache. Or a SOC 2 audit if you're from the States. Having that regulatory piece in place that you can show these assessors that I've got the tools that are looking after this for me and this is my plan and this is what I'm doing goes a long way. So talking of a plan, you need a plan. It's an age-old cliche, but fail to prepare, prepare to fail, they say. So make a plan. Today we're going to discuss what that plan might be as far as Power BI and Fabric is concerned. What are the things that you can put in place? What strategies can you employ to make sure you're adhering to those points on the previous slide? After your plan, you monitor. So you train your staff, you tell them your plan, you show them how you want them to build in your data environment. Then you monitor what goes on. And users are users. Nobody's perfect. You're going to get things that don't work. So then you go through a repair phase. And by repair, I don't mean you're going to go and fix a broken data set. I mean you're going to fix a part of the plan that hasn't worked. You're going to implement a new process. You're going to go back and reiterate this over and over again. This goes on forever. It gets better, then you bring new things in, it gets worse. Just get used to that monitor, fix, monitor, fix. How many of you have a Goldilocks data environment? What I mean by that is, you've got your source systems, you've got a warehouse that's filled with data from an ETL. You've then got the one data set to rule them all. They feed all of your users' reports. Everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet. Everything's perfect. Not a single person put their hand up. I did speak to two ladies earlier over on the stand who I told not to come to this talk because they pretty much got it nailed on. It's rare, and chances are they probably didn't, but they were close. Realistically, this is what you've got. So you've got that whole source, warehouse, ETL into a cube kind of analysis services. But then you've got finance, and finance don't want their data in the warehouse, so they build their own. They've got one data set, but we've got the other data set. But then combine them data sets to make another data set in Power BI. We'll then feed some reports to the user. You've got team level BI, where let's say the sales team have a suite of reports that are powered from the one data set. Fantastic, that's brilliant. there's a couple of users in sales that actually want a slightly tweaked version, so they've created their own. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And then you'll see we've got bc.csv. BC stands for business critical, because there is always somebody somewhere at the end of the chain that's got a CSV file that no one knows exists that somehow powers the entire business, and they're manually updating it on a Friday, and it's been working for years, and you don't know it's there. This is what you find. This is what. And why does that exist? Well, that exists because of this, what I call the I need it yesterday effect. If you want something put in through Central BI, you log a ticket. 3 weeks later, someone's got capacity, they pick it up, they put it in, it goes through a UAT testing phase, and then it gets released to prod. I have not got time for that. I'm a power user. I know how to do Power BI. I've got my CSV file. I can just throw that in. You can't govern that centrally. No one knows that exists except that user, but they've got it when they needed it immediately. And it's not wrong. It is a correct way to do things. Nobody's saying that everything in your BI estate has to be centrally governed, as long as you can govern it. How do you govern who can do what in Power BI? Workspaces. I haven't done a head count, but it looks like there's at least 150, if not more, of you in here. And if I asked you all to write down on a piece of paper what is a workspace, I would get at least 150 slightly different answers, because nobody can really define it. It's a business entity. Finance have one. Sales have one. Stock have one. No, it's a person's entity. I've got my workspace. You've got your workspace. No, we do it by project. So we've got some new online sales, and we'll do that project in a workspace for that. Okay, if you want to. No, every report gets a workspace, obviously. Please don't ever do this. And then there's the, who cares? A workspace is just a place for you to host data so people can read it. It doesn't really matter. Stop. Some of these are right. Some of these have a use case, but you need a holistic definition. Now, pens and paper, the next slide is absolutely full of information. Please take this away. A workspace is a method of distribution and security. The job of a workspace is to contain the data, and only the data that is necessarily for the audience that you have defined, in the security of that workspace. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be a business entity. It doesn't have to be a project entity. What it has to be is a container for the right people at the right level. If you're adhering to that, you're doing it right. Told you it was full of information. So, option one, how do you use a workspace? Well, I'm going to put my development, my test, and my production reports all in one workspace. Is this the right thing to do? Consultant's answer, it depends. Yes, actually. If you've got a super user at the end who's just got a bunch of CSV files that she wants to make a report out of, then yeah, that's fantastic, because only she needs that. She's got access to that. She can do all that. That's great. Step up from that. Let's use apps to promote production reports. Now, what that does is, without blowing out your workspaces, it gives you another level of granular security, because you can change the permissions on the app, and you can do your development, and until everything's ready, you don't have to promote to the app. It gives you that extra bubble to put your consumers in to protect them from the whole development. Both of these are good approaches in the right circumstance. And this is where having a plan is important. It's not which one of these should I use, it's which version of this should I use and where. How many people do this? A few, good. Pipeline development, fantastic. So you've got, if you've never used pipelines in Power BI, you effectively have a dev, test, and prod placeholder. You assign a workspace to that placeholder, and you promote through, and you give people. I keep saying people. I'm going to stop saying people. I'm going to clarify. Don't give people workspace access in Power BI. Control your workspace access through Active Directory groups and put people in and out of them when you need to. Because if you've got a member of staff that's got 4 or 5 different levels across I don't know, 20 different workspaces, and then they take on a junior that has to shadow him. You've got to then go and implement that junior in all of those workspaces. No, just put him in the AD group. Done. Easy. Doddle. So when I say people, I mean AD group. But you assign the AD group permissions to each pipeline, and that way only the development people have the kind of contributor access they need to build things, and only readers have access to prod to be able to consume the fully working reports. For those of you who are following the development of Power BI closely and have a very competent dev team, you can wrap all this in Git now. That gives you fantastic control over all of it. It's rare that I see it implemented, but the option is there if you've got the staff with the skill to do that. So the problem with pipelines is you've now just tripled your workload. Every single workspace has to have 3 workspaces. The example on the board, I'm using regional sales. I'm using a retail example throughout. So let's talk about regional sales. I've got a north, east, south, and west regional manager who need to see only their own sales data. So I have to build 4 different data sets, each. That wasn't me. There we go. Each with their own filter over which region's data is in there. So suddenly your 1 workspace for regional reports became 3 because you've got pipelines, which are now 12 because you've got different filters, and you can see how this is going to get out of hand. So the answer is, don't do this, do this. Row-level security is your friend here. For those of you that don't know what row-level security is, in your model you effectively add a user table and then bridge it into your data set. When you sign into Power BI as a service, you sign in with your single sign-on. You assign roles to those sign-ons in the service. That then automatically filters what rows in the reports each logon can see. So you can give the regional report to all of your regional managers, and north won't see south, won't see west, won't see east, and you've only got to manage 3 pipeline workspaces again. So you've just shrunk down the amount of monitoring and administration you've got to do over your workspaces. Moving away from Power BI for a minute, sensitivity labels. How many people utilize sensitivity labels in their business? For those of you that have got your hands up, keep them up if your default is internal use. Good. A few of you, but not all of you. So the reason for sensitivity labels is I've got a colleague, John. John's great. I send John data and reports all the time. John opens them, reads them, and tells me how terrible they are, and then I fix them. Unfortunately, I've got a customer external to the business whose email address is very, very similar to John's. And there may be a day where I, bit groggy on a Friday afternoon, ping the report to the customer. Oh. Even if you're using sensitivity labels, but your default is public or client confidential, that user can open that report. Suddenly you've got a GDPR issue. If internal is your default and you accidentally send it to a customer, yeah, you drop an email to InfoSec and say, sorry, boss, I made a mistake, but nothing's really going to come of it. Because you choose to lower the security. You don't choose to put the security in place at the time of sending. You're covering your own back by using internal use as a default. Something else you could do in Power BI, you can endorse your data sets. Data sets aren't endorsed as a default. They're just data sets. They exist. You can promote as a user a data set. You can say to your colleagues who are on your level, hey, I've just built this data set, or I've stumbled across this data set. It is full of valuable information, and I've looked at it, and I trust it because I've done a little bit of work just to verify what's in there. I'm going to give it the thumbs up. Go and use that when you want to build a report. One step on from that is certification. It's like promotion on steroids because it comes from the people who are in charge. Rather than just casting an eye over it and putting a thumb up, they actually test the data. They make sure it's correct. Only admins can certify data sets. But if an admin has certified it and it's wrong, that's on them. So if you see a certified data set and there's an option to use it, use it. Right. So what does all this look like? You've got pipelines and you've got user workspaces with everything in, and you've got workspaces with apps, and all of these are correct if they're used in the correct use case, but oh my God, how do you monitor it? This is where you want to put a few tools in place. And the first one we're going to cover, and one that gets a really, really bad rap, by me, admittedly, but still probably doesn't deserve as much trash, is the native Power BI monitoring and audit logs. They're there, they exist. They don't need to, and they do a job if you need a quick answer. So they are fast. You click, for anyone who doesn't know, you click Get Usage Metrics Report, you wait 10 seconds, you've got your report. It's free, you don't have to pay for it, it's included in Power BI. So there are your pros, it's free and it's fast. It's not very detailed, and it only covers a 30-day rolling window. So if you're trying to build a picture of Power BI adoption through the business, or you're trying to troubleshoot who's using their license and who's not, but the people whose workspaces you're looking at are full of monthly reports, so they're only logging in once anyway, what use is that? Not great. Same with the Lineage Explorer. Lineage Explorer is on a workspace level. Great. So what you're trying to do as a data pusher on the business is you're trying to build this workspace that has this semantic modeling that you want people to use. You've given them other workspaces for their projects that they can connect to this model through, but Power BI only lets you see the lineage one workspace at a time, so you don't see that crossover. Again, it's good for a quick question. It's not that good as far as building a tenant-wide lineage picture is concerned. So, there is a better tool for it. No prizes for guessing what I'm about to say. Power BI Sentinel. We recognize that this was an issue, so we did something about it. We basically give you what the Power BI native gives you, and then a lot more. We pull all of the data from the API, we write it back to your environment and give it you to query. It's a SQL database at the end of the day. When it's all said and done, it's your data, lives in your environment. You can do with it what you will. The benefit of us building the database in your environment is we know the schema, which means we can build a report suite that we give to you blank. You plug that database into it. Suddenly, you've got full consumption of all of that data, and you've done no development work at all whatsoever. A usage summary. Because we're writing it to a DB, you can build a picture of adoption over however long your data retention policy is. We've got 5 years worth of audit data that we can query. Fantastic. We do data lineage cross-tenant. What you're seeing on the bottom here is we've got 57 reports in this workspace that's selected, and those are the data sources, workspace, semantic models, and reports. But we've got a workspace selected, but the workspace is showing 2 workspaces. Well, that's because there's some interaction and some crossover between them, because we're showing you tenant-level lineage, not just the picture of what's going on in that one workspace in isolation. And then it does a few other little neat tricks. It will use some calculations to figure out what's really going on inside. So it'll tell you things like, this user's got admin rights to this workspace, and in the last 28 days, they've done 120 things in this workspace, and none of them have required admin permissions. In fact, they've only needed contributor. Brilliant. So you can bring them down. There you go. You've just secured your workspace a little bit more. ISO are happy, SOC 2 are happy, InfoSec are happy, and you've not had to query anything other than just look at a report. And these 3 headings that you'll see here, they kind of align and give you a health score. It's kind of what we think your data environment is. This is a template. You can set your own benchmarks. All of this is fully customizable. It's your data, it's your template. You do with it what you will. We just deliver it. Every time I give this talk, somebody puts their hand up and says, what about Microsoft Purview? Somebody's going to say, how about Microsoft Purview? I can see the smiles. Fantastic. Brilliant product. Don't have a bad thing to say about it. Except, we are talking about the scope of Power BI and Fabric. We are deep diving into the functionality of Power BI. Purview does not do that. Purview is a holistic, full data enterprise governance and monitoring tool. If you're trying to hang a picture on a wall and you need to hammer a nail in, you don't get a sledgehammer, you go and get the right tool for the job. Purview is a sledgehammer. There are times in business where you will need a sledgehammer. Go and get Purview. It's fantastic. It's big, it's bulky, it's expensive, it takes a lot to implement and run. But if your business requires it, fantastic, use it. For most of us who are just going out on our first Power BI foray, or we've got a few hundred reports, Sentinel is that sweet spot. So we'll quickly run through a recap. Power BI native, built in, fast, free, very, very limited, difficult to see holistics. Purview, fantastic, covers everything. However, little expensive to set up and run, and limited with how granular it can get with its Power BI data. And then somewhere in the middle, the sweet spot, Power BI Sentinel, whose sole focus is Power BI, so it does get that granularity. It's tenant-wide. It will show you things that you can't see in the GUI in the Power BI service. And not only that, as we saw, it actively makes management suggestions for you. It's not going to run your tenant for you. It's not going to start taking permissions away and deleting workspaces that aren't used, but it's going to highlight them all for you so you can make that decision. And that's what it's about. It's about having that visibility of what's going on in your environment to enable you to do that repair that we saw at the end of the other slide. That's the important thing. I think with that, I've pretty much covered everything except for disaster recovery. None of the other two offer a disaster recovery solution. Power BI Sentinel takes automated backups through API triggers in your Power BI estate, pushes them to a storage account up in Azure in your environment. Should somebody go in who shouldn't have access and completely wreck a data set or a report, you can just download that, it's in your environment, publish it back up to the service, pick up where you left off. No headache. Fantastic. Also ticks another ISO box. With that, if you've got any questions or you want to chat, I'll be around for the rest of today. I'll be around all day tomorrow. I'm on the Sentinel stand, which is behind this wall. We're opposite the governance tent. Please come and say hello if you've got any questions about what I've gone through, questions about your estate, questions about data in general. Like I say, you want to come and chat about the weather, whatever, come and talk to me. Add me on LinkedIn if you want to talk to me after the event and you haven't managed to catch me. That's the best way to get hold. And I think with that, I will leave you to go and make a plan.